In the shadows of time, two giants awoke. To the west, an empire of iron discipline, Rome, the master of legions. To the east, a realm of ancient fire, Persia, the guardian of civilizations older than memory. When these titans met upon the battlefield, it was not merely a war for land, but for destiny itself. A struggle that would decide the fate of continents and echo across the centuries as the war that changed history forever. The world has always been shaped by great collision. When cultures rise, when civilizations reach their zenith, they do not remain still. They expand, they hunger, they seek dominion over the land, the sea, and the soul of mankind. And in the annals of human history, few collisions have been as monumental as the clash between Rome and Persia. On one side stood Rome, a titan born from the banks of the Tiber, its legions forged in the crucible of endless conquest. They were not merely soldiers. They were the very embodiment of discipline and order and unyielding resolve. Each legionnaire a cog in the machine of empire, marching to the steady rhythm of conquest, their banners unfurled beneath the Mediterranean sun. And to the east rose Persia, a realm far older, a civilization steeped in traditions that reach back into the dawn of time. It was not a kingdom, nor even a simple empire. It was a civilization carrying the memory of Cyrus, Darius, and Xerxes, rulers who once gazed westward with dreams of conquering the very lands Rome now is. From the palaces of Ctesiphon to the vast plains that stretched beyond the horizon, Persia was a world unto itself, vast, unbending, and proud. These were not two ordinary rivals. These were the giants of the ancient age, and destiny itself seemed to conspire to bring them into conflict. For between them lay the heart of the world, the crossroads of Mesopotamia, the fertile crescents of Armenia, and the glittering pathways of the Silk Road. Whoever controlled these lands would not merely hold provinces, they would command the arteries of wealth, faith, and power that flowed across continents. The confrontation was inevitable. For Rome, expansion was not an option. It was survival. The empire's strength depended upon the unceasing flow of tribute, slaves, and resources to fuel its mighty engine. To stand still was to weaken, and Persia equally could not allow Rome to encroach upon the lands it considered its sphere of destiny. Pride, survival, ambition, all intertwined to make war unavoidable. Imagine the scene. The banners of Rome fluttering in the desert wind, their scarlet threads burning against the endless horizon. The clashing shields of the legion, their iron discipline unshaken even in the face of scorching suns and endless marches. Across the field, the thunder of Persian cavalry, cataphracts clad in armor like living fortresses, their arrows darkening the sky, their kings commanding not merely soldiers, but warriors bound by a tradition of fire and blood. This was more than an encounter of armies. It was a meeting of worlds. To the Romans, Persia represented the unyielding East, the eternal rival, the shadow that stood against their dream of universal dominion. To the Persians, Rome was a brash usurper, a new empire daring to stand where the great dynasties of the East had ruled since time immemorial. Each saw in the other not merely an enemy, but a mirror, a reflection of their own imperial ambition. And so the world held its breath, for when two titans collide, the earth itself trembles. The clash of Rome and Persia was not a passing war. It was a struggle that would last for centuries, fought not only with steel, but with will, pride, and an unshakable desire to outlast the other. Their battles were not confined to a single field or generation. Instead, they stretched across the ages, from the sands of Carrhae to the walls of Antioch, echoing like thunder across the centuries. In this conflict, there were no true victors, only survivors. Yet in the sheer scale of their rivalry, Rome and Persia carved the very shape of history. They were two stars colliding in the darkness of antiquity, and in their collision the world was forever changed. History remembers few rivalries with such weight, such magnitude, such terrible grandeur. Across the dust of empires, across centuries carved in blood and stone, one conflict towers above the rest. The struggle between Rome and Persia, a collision not of mere kingdoms but of civilizations. Worlds apart, yet destined to meet upon the battlefield of time. To the west, Rome, a people who began in obscurity, rising from a small settlement on the banks of the Tiber, until the very earth itself seemed to bend beneath their march. The legionnaire, helmet gleaming, shield raised, discipline unbroken, became the symbol of Rome's relentless will. They conquered not with chaos, but with order. Roads cut across mountains, aqueducts spanned valleys, cities flourished in the shadow of their eagles. To Rome, empire was not simply ambition, it was survival. To stand still was to die, and to the east, Persia. Ancient, proud, and rooted deeper in time than Rome could yet imagine, this was no upstart state, no new conqueror. Persia carried within its veins the fire of dynasties stretching back to Cyrus the Great, Darius, Xerxes, names already etched into eternity. From Persepolis to Ctesiphon, its kings reigned not over mere land, but over civilizations layered one upon another. Persia was a world entire. Its cavalry thundered across open plains, its nobility clothed in silk and gold, its people bound to a tradition of empire that had endured for ages. These were not equals meeting by chance. These were storms gathering, drawn to each other by the very gravity of history. Between them lay the heart of the ancient world, Mesopotamia, Armenia, the glittering veins of the Silk Road. Whoever commanded these crossroads held more than territory. They held destiny itself. The lifeblood of trade, the circulation of ideas, the flow of wealth, all passed through these contested lands. To lose them was to bleed. To claim them was to rule the known world. And so collision was inevitable. Rome, ever hungry, pushed eastward with ironclad ambition. Persia, proud and unyielding, would not surrender the lands it had long deemed its birthright. It was not simply war, it was survival. Picture the moment when their armies met. The scarlet banners of Rome whipping in the desert wind, the measured thud of legionary boots against cracked earth, their shields locked tight like the scales of a serpent. Across the plain, a different vision. Armored cataphracts, warriors encased to toe in steel, their arrows blotting out the sun as their kings rode beneath gilded canopies. It was more than a battle of weapons. It was a contest of philosophies, of worlds, discipline against ferocity, order against fire, the dream of West against the memory of East, and in each other they found a reflection. Rome, gazing eastward, saw not merely an enemy, but a mirror of its own imperial hunger. Persia, staring westward, beheld in Rome not simply a threat, but an echo of the great empires it had once been. Both saw in the other what they themselves were, vast, unyielding, eternal. The earth trembled beneath their struggle. The clash between Rome and Persia was not bound to a single year, not even a single century. It stretched across ages, like thunder that refuses to fade. From Carrhae to the gates of Antioch, from Armenia's hills to the banks of the Euphrates, their rivalry endured. Neither side broke, neither side bent, and in that endless conflict, history itself was forged. For when giants collide, the world is never the same again. War, in this age, was never a single clash, never a fleeting skirmish. It was a rhythm that pulsed through centuries, a drumbeat of blood and ambition that echoed between Rome and Persia. For neither side sought merely to defend. Each sought to dominate, to bend the other to its will, and in doing so, to write its name across the parchment of eternity. At Carrhae in 53 BC, the stage was set. Rome, under the proud and arrogant Crassus, sought to carve glory from the east. His legions marched with confidence, their standards gleaming beneath the desert sun. Yet what awaited them was not submission, but annihilation. The Parthians, heirs to Persia's throne, unleashed a storm of arrows. Horse archers rode in endless circles, their bows raining death upon men unprepared for such a war. And then came the cataphracts, armored titans, crushing all before them. In the heat and dust, Rome's might shattered. 20,000 lay dead, their bodies scattered like broken statues across the plains. Carrhae became a scar upon Rome's pride, a bitter reminder the East could not be so easily conquered. But empires do not rest upon a single defeat. Rome learned, adapted, returned. Generals like Trajan pressed into Mesopotamia, capturing cities, seizing land. Yet Persia, time and again, endured. Its kings wielded not only steel but cunning. They struck when Rome was distracted, reclaiming lost ground, harassing supply lines, turning the deserts themselves into weapons. Theirs was a war fought as much in strategy as in blood. And in this endless dance, diplomacy became a weapon sharper than any blade. Kings and emperors signed treaties they never intended to honor, made promises with one hand while preparing for war with the other. Armenia became the prize and the pawn, a kingdom caught between giants. Its rulers swore allegiance to whichever power seemed strongest at the moment, only to betray it when tides shifted. To control Armenia was to hold the mountains, the passes, the very doorway between east and west. Neither Rome nor Persia would yield it, and so Armenia became a battlefield soaked in centuries of blood. The wars were not confined to distant deserts. Cities themselves became pawns. Antioch, jewel of the East, fell to Persian hands more than once. Roman emperors were captured. Valerian himself, humiliated, taken alive by Shapur, displayed like a living trophy of Persia's triumph. Never before had the master of Rome been so utterly shamed, yet even this humiliation did not end the struggle. For Rome's pride was indomitable, and from defeat they rose again, sharper, more determined, more ruthless. This was the nature of their war, a cycle of advance and retreat, of victories hollowed by swift reversal. Neither side ever truly broke the other, for both were too vast, too enduring, too deeply carved into the bones of civilization. And yet with every campaign, every betrayal, every treaty written and broken, the world itself shifted. Roads were built for legions that never returned. Cities rose in prosperity only to be razed in fire. Borders shifted like shadows, never permanent, never certain. It was not simply a war of steel. It was a war of endurance, of wit, of patience. A war fought not in years, but in centuries. Rome and Persia, locked in a deadly embrace, strangled each other slowly, neither able to land the final blow, neither willing to let go. And in that eternal struggle, both empires were changed forever. For in facing one another, they forged themselves anew. Sharper, harder, but always scarred by the blood they spilled in the shadow of destiny. War is never waged by kings alone. It is not fought only in the halls of marble palaces, nor decided solely by the clash of cavalry and legionaries. War is born by the countless unseen, by the farmer who abandons his field, by the child who grows up amid ruins, by the nameless who vanish into the smoke of battle. And between Rome and Persia, the cost was terrible, not for years nor decades, but for centuries. The frontiers of their empires became wastelands. Cities once humming with trade were turned into charred skeletons of stone. Antioch, that jewel of Hellenistic glory, was sacked and rebuilt, each time rising like a wounded phoenix, each time bearing deeper scars. Villages were emptied as conscripts marched under banners they barely understood, their lives swallowed by wars they did not choose. Whole populations were uprooted, dragged from their homes, marched across deserts and rivers to serve as tools of empire. And yet, amid the ruin, something remarkable stirred. For even as blood was spilled, cultures entwined. From Persia, Rome tasted luxuries that reshaped its very identity. Silks shimmered in the markets of the Mediterranean, perfumes and spices drifted through Roman villas, and Persian art, with its motifs of fire and kingship, found its way into Roman palaces. The East, once an enemy, also became a fascination, a mirror of refinement that Rome both envied and absorbed. Persia, too, was not immune. Roman tactics, Roman siegecraft, Roman discipline, these were studied, borrowed, adapted. Persian kings who scorned Rome's arrogance nonetheless recognized the genius of her engineers, her administrators, her ability to pen conquered peoples into a functioning whole. To fight Rome was to learn from Rome. And so Persia, even in resistance, was transformed. Religion, too, crossed borders. The cult of Mithras, born in Persia, spread like wildfire among Roman legions, worshipped in underground chambers across Europe. Later, Christianity, nurtured in the crucible of Rome, reached eastward, seeping into Persian lands. War had torn them apart, but belief, trade, and curiosity bound them together in ways steel never could. Still, the cost was relentless. Armies of tens of thousands cut each other down in open plains, leaving fields of bones as grim reminders of ambition. The rivers of Mesopotamia, once lifelines of agriculture, were stained with the blood of soldiers and civilians alike. Plague followed armies, sweeping through cities weakened by famine and fear. Generations knew nothing but the shadow of war. And yet perhaps this is the paradox of their struggle. Out of devastation came exchange. Out of hatred came influence. Rome would not be Rome without the silks, spices, and mysteries of the East. Persia would not be Persia without the hard lessons learned from centuries of facing the iron fist of the West. Their rivalry consumed them, yet it also defined them, leaving behind a strange legacy where beauty and brutality walked hand in hand. This was the human cost of empire, and the strange gift of conflict. The price of ambition was ruin, but from ruin arose connection. And so while Rome and Persia bled each other dry, they also carved invisible bridges between their worlds, bridges of trade, of faith, of art, bridges that would outlast the empires themselves. When the dust of centuries settles, when the banners rot and the armies fade into the silence of memory, what remains of war is not only the bodies nor the ruins, but the legacy. And the rivalry of Rome and Persia, a struggle that spanned lifetimes, left behind a shadow so vast it shaped the very world that came after. Neither Rome nor Persia ever truly triumphed. They struck, they bled, they endured, but victory was never absolute. For every city taken, another was lost. For every treaty signed, another was broken. Their war was not one of conquest, but of survival, of endurance. And in that balance, in that stalemate carved by centuries, both empires were weakened. And it was in their weakness that history turned. For as they exhausted themselves, new forces stirred at the edges of the known world. To the south, in the deserts of Arabia, a faith was rising. A faith that would soon become a storm, sweeping through lands both Roman and Persian alike. Islam emerged into a world already fractured, its empires weary from endless rivalry. And when the tide surged, neither Rome nor Persia could resist it fully. The Byzantines faltered, the Sassanids fell. The ancient rivalry paved the way for something new, something greater, something unstoppable. But even in their decline, the echoes of Rome and Persia remained. Their contest defined the very map of civilization. The borders they fought over, Mesopotamia, Armenia, Syria, became battlegrounds for centuries to come, their strategic weight never diminishing. The cultural bridges they built unwillingly through war and exchange endured long after their banners fell. Roman law and engineering lived on, shaping Europe and beyond. Persian art, philosophy, and kingship traditions seeped into the veins of the Islamic caliphates that replaced them, ensuring that the fire of Persia never truly died. And so, their legacy is not found in victory, but in influence. They were two titans who could not destroy each other, and in their eternal struggle, they carved the blueprint for the empires of the future. Their rivalry taught the world that no power, however vast, could claim eternity. That ambition unchecked consumes itself. That empires, like men, are mortal. Yet there is something eternal in their defiance. Rome, the dream of order and law stretching to the ends of the earth. Persia, the flame of civilization, carrying the memory of kings who once ruled from the Aegean to the Indus, both gone, yet never forgotten. Their names still spoken, their wars still studied, their shadows still cast over the very idea of empire. For when Rome and Persia clashed, it was not simply a war for land. It was a war for the soul of the world. And in their struggle, the course of history was forever changed. Their empires fell, but their legacy endures. In our borders, in our cultures, in our very understanding of power. Two giants who refused to yield, whose echoes still thunder through the corridors of time. And so, as the centuries whisper their stories through the ruins of Rome and the broken palaces of Persia, one truth remains. Greatness is never eternal. Empires rise like fire, they blaze across the world, and then, like all flames, they fade into ash. But in their rise, in their struggle, they leave behind lessons, warnings carved in blood, wisdom written in the bones of history. The rivalry of Rome and Persia was not a tale of one victor standing above the other. It was the story of endurance, of pride, of two civilizations so vast, so unyielding, that they could not destroy one another. And in that stalemate, they forged the very foundations of the world that followed. They taught us that no empire is invincible, that power without balance consumes itself, and that even in war, cultures exchange, ideas endure, and legacies outlast the swords that first carried them. As we look back upon their struggle, let us not only remember the ruins, the blood, the fire, but the inheritance they left us, law, art, belief, and the enduring reminder that history is shaped not by those who dream of eternity, but by those who leave behind echoes strong enough to withstand time. For Rome and Persia are gone, yet their shadow is still with us. Their war, though long ended, still whispers in our politics, our borders, our faiths, and our very idea of what it means to rule. To study them is to study ourselves. To remember them is to remember that history, like empire, is never truly finished. And so I ask you, look upon their story not as distant relics, but as a mirror. For in the rise and fall of these giants, we glimpse our own future. The question is not whether empires fall. The question is what will endure after we are gone.